Today we're painting my favourite character type, an apothecary. Roll the music. Hello and welcome to another Scuffed Hammer video. My name is Hammer and today I'm busting back into my backlog and getting rid of some of that grey. I'll be doing that by painting an Apothecary Biologus. Now this guy is in nearly every single one of my lists, and he and my two lieutenants are the sole reasons that I'm not getting those 10 sweet victory points when I play them on the tabletop. Enough waffling, let's get into painting. This model has been built, primed, and had the first layer of paint on it for over 12 months now. And that's because looking at my first Apothecary as a reference, it sucked. And that mainly comes down from trying to use a pure white to paint the armor on the first Apothecary, and since then I've learnt a lot of new tips and tricks, so I won't be making that mistake again. Now I played this model really carefully because I started with a base coat of white and this was an airbrush color, so making a mistake would be very difficult to rectify. So naturally, the first color I picked was black. I used a black contrast paint and then used some rattling grime, and then going over with a dry brushing of lead belcher to replicate Jay from Eons of Battle's recipe for dry brushed gunmetal. And I decided to go with this look over a more flashy one because this guy runs around the battlefield collecting samples so he can know the alien threat better. And if this guy is just going to be constantly facing Xenos threat and probably going to die with a higher chance than everyone else, then maybe he shouldn't have as flashy a weapon and as flashy gear as everyone else. And to keep it a little less flashy, I'm just going to pick out a lot of details with silver rather than gold. Stuff like the chains and the tools and the servo arms, all gonna be silver. And I have to say, on the tabletop, at least in my experience, this guy kinda lives up to how he does in the lore. I pretty much exclusively run him with a 6-man Eradicator squad, and my friends do not like them. Running them in the Salamander themed detachments, I run them up mid, sit them down, and now I have a melter hitting on 2s and 3s if it's the multi-melter with lethal hits. Then you add in their special rule which allows them to re-roll every single roll if it's against a vehicle or monster, and they pretty much annihilate whatever they shoot at. In fact, they have annihilated a Stomper turn 1. But I digress. Moving on, I decided to pick out some of the small details with leather, which was only 1 gun pouch. Moving on from that, it's time to tell everybody that this Apothecary is from the Salamanders. In addition to the pauldron, which is actually from the Salamander upgrade kit, I decided to paint the Imperialis green. I got this idea when I saw a guy on Facebook. In his post, he had base coated his model blue and then painted the armor white. He decided to leave all the gold bits blue so he could paint them separately. That means it was an Apothecary Biologus with white armor and a blue Imperialis, and he was painting Ultramarines. And I don't know why, but I just really loved that look. So I decided to steal it and make it an actual feature. Also, I am so happy with how perfect I have painted these lenses. I do not think I have painted a more perfect helmet lens in my entire time painting models. Before moving on and doing some of the more cooler effects I have planned for this model, I'm just going to spend a bit of time picking out some of the smaller details, like the 1 single purity seal attached to this model on the hip. And of course, brightening up the green, giving it that extra little punch that I have for the rest of my army. I don't know how I came up with this recipe. I think I just had both of these colors and the Warp Storm glow just wasn't doing it for me, and I decided to combine it, and for some reason it worked. Moving on to a different type of green. This was actually one of the hardest parts of the process for me, because for some reason I decided to paint the tools before I painted the tabard, which made it 1,000 times harder. I know, I could have just painted over the top of it and then come back and painted over the top of it with silver, but I kind of got stuck in trying to be perfect and instead just made my life more difficult than it had to be. And I think this is a great time to self-plug. If you are really interested in this content, it would be great if you gave a like and subscribe, maybe even hop on over to our Discord. And if you too have made your life difficult for no reason, drop it below in the comments. I would love to hear how you just made a process more difficult than you needed to. Back to the painting, I chose this blue because I have it laying around and I never use it, and I thought it would look really good as like a cooling tube for whatever samples the Apothecary has collected. And the final touch before moving on to the cooler effects is bringing back the Salamander's logo by using some white. And now for the fun stuff. I have this Army Painter's dry blood that I've never used before and I wanted to give it a try. And I must say, I'm really impressed. It really adds a dimension to it rather than just being all fresh and icky, sticky blood. It looks like these tools have been used and have dried off a little bit. I tried to add a few little details in there, like the Apothecary has shoved his fist in and gotten some samples from his brothers, and that his tools have blood bleeding out onto his tabard. And I've also tried to make the blood splatters look directional, like the blade has sawed through and the chainsaw has thrown blood backwards. And then I went back and really enhanced the effect with some blood for the blood god, making it look like it's dripping and pooling and giving a second dimension to the blood rather than it all just being ugh. To keep adding to the effects, there were enough little features on this model that looked like they could glow that I decided to bust out the airbrush and do some OSL. Now don't worry, there are plenty of ways that you can do OSL without an airbrush. I just personally don't like doing them because they take up so much time, and if I've got an airbrush, I might as well use it. For the little Pip-Boy looking thing on his arm, I decided to use a yellow for a glowing screen, and then I decided to use the same yellow for the light, having it shine directly down on top of his arm like he's pointing in the direction that the light is. Almost like the sensors have detected movement and it's just swiveled to assist in his aiming. And then because Tyranids have a lot of weird biotechnology going on, I decided to make whatever sample the Apothecary has collected in his little vivispectrum, I think is what it's called, glow. I did this by starting out with a magenta and then going over the top of it with a purple. By not completely covering the magenta, it kind of looks like it's got this weird, otherworldly, almost dark matter kind of glow to it, where it looks dark, but it's actually giving off light. And to really sell the glow, I make sure to overspill onto the bottom of the Apothecary's legs. To move on with the basing, I snap him off the base, he is only there on super glue after all, and start painting the base. By snapping him off, I ensure that I get a nice even coat of the red, yellow, and Mordant Earth. And in addition, I make sure I don't get any overspill, particularly on the tabard, but I also am not a massive fan of it going onto his feet either. Now, I'm a massive advocate for making things easier on yourself, and this basing scheme is so reflective of that. You quite literally throw down two colors, let them dry, then throw on a cracking paint and let it dry, and then boom, done. By reducing the amount of stress you have to do to get a model completed, you're increasing the likelihood of getting the model started. And it's better to have simple bases and painted models than complicated bases and no models. Once everything's dry, I use some super glue and tack him on, and with that, it's about time for a final reveal. Well, that about wraps us up for this week. This model was a lot of fun to paint, and I can't believe I got into my own head about it for this long, because it looks amazing. Taking a look at the two of them side by side, it's really encouraging to see how far my skills have grown in what is essentially 12 months. And that by making the mistake on the first model, I made sure that I would never make that kind of mistake again. If you would like to see more content like this, make sure you like and subscribe so you don't miss any more uploads. Our goal is to get people painting no matter the skill level and encourage them no matter the skill level. We all start somewhere and we all grow at our own pace. That's it from me. My name is Hammer, and this has been Scuffed Hammer. Bye bye.